We have the NERC, the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, that introduced different bans to the country, because they say they want where cost-reflective tariff, where people will pay amount of money and then they will be able to shore up the infrastructure and all of that. But National Assembly, in its ongoing Electricity Reform Act, are saying that they are going to scrap the Band D, Band C, Band B, and the Band B, and the bandits, as I usually call the Band A's, that are now complaining, about what they get as power supply. How do you think this will? To what extent do you think this will help in resolving the power bottlenecks or brouhaha we've been having over the years?
I'm of the view that it's not a good idea. I think that the intention, maybe what the National Assembly should be doing is to work with NEC to have a timeline, or to have timelines and determine at what point do you have some Band B or all of Band B move to Band A and Band C's move to Band B. I think rather than scrapping, you should have a timeline. In the next 5 years, we expect that X number would have moved 2 bands. Scrapping it, because the idea of banding is to match pricing with quality of service. So Band A, if you can provide 20 hours of electricity to 24 hours, then you should get the tariff you ought to get, right? But if it's B, then slightly less. It's an efficiency game. It encourages players to be more efficient. I understand that there'll always be the second argument that then everyone is going to concentrate on mostly the Band A guys and maybe partly the Band B, and everyone else suffers. So rather than do that, I think there should be a timeline, and then there should be timelines, and there should be obligations, right? Ensure that there's an obligation within a period of time for everyone to move. And then there should be penalties for not meeting that threshold. Of course, provided that the government too also does what it ought to do, particularly around transmission, so that there's sufficient power available for the distribution networks. That's my view. I don't think you should just scrap it. I think there should be timelines for people to move across bands. So I don't think it's a good idea. That's my view.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I have to say, all this talk of Band A, Band B, Band C, it's a very classist way of rationing out electricity, almost very dystopian. But I want to ask this. We are seeing the world racing valiantly towards renewable energy, while Nigeria is still so heavily reliant on oil and gas. What are the consequences for this, our slow shift towards renewable energy for us in the global power market? How will this affect us? Does this leave us at risk or at a disadvantage? And how can we curb this?
I think the energy transition debate is self-serving. It's a bit selfish by the West. I say this because if you remember during COVID, everyone moved back to gas. Some even moved to coal. Anytime there's a crisis, an energy crisis in the world, the guys who are pushing energy transition move back to what they consider dirty energy. So I think it's self-serving personally. And I think that whilst we should begin to work towards decarbonization, we've got 2060 target for net zero, we shouldn't jump at everything the West speaks to, because for me it's self-serving. If it doesn't work for them, and remember, there's supposed to be a fund that the Western world, which pollutes the most, recall that Africa does barely 4% of the emissions. The rest of the world does the remaining 96%, and they were even supposed to fund there's supposed to be contributions to a particular fund, I think $100 billion fund, and most of them haven't. So for me, I think it's self-serving. I think we should make the most of our gas whilst also considering energy transition. I'm sure if you go on Nigerian roads, you see more Teslas, you see more electric vehicles. I see more people using solar panels. Where I live, electricity is very expensive because the estate does have its own private power arrangement. So I have a combination of the estate power arrangement and solar panels, right? So a number of people who are beginning to see, without being forced, if you find it cheaper, you would begin to see people gravitate towards it. So I think we should have a hybrid arrangement whilst we make the most of our gas. And it's negotiation. Recall a number of guys were looking at an option to Russia for gas. A lot of Europe has been looking for options, and they've been having conversations with Nigeria to provide that option. So we should negotiate. We should have an African strategy where much of Africa are clients, right, and do less of the bidding of the West. Because I think the energy transition debate, more often than not, is self-serving. If it works for them, gas is dirty energy. If it doesn't work, gas is clean energy. So and I'm sure you're also aware a number of the IOCs are reversing their energy transition strategies and plans. And a number of banks, like I think it's the Bank of America, a number of banks have withdrawn from some energy transition groups. So it's self-serving. When it works, you do it. When it doesn't work, so we must have our own strategy. And I think it must be an African-focused strategy.
Sounds like a true African.
Mr. Oni, let me come to you here, because I like to be very practical with my questions. You spoke about solar. And I tell you right now, to get inverter in your house, you need almost $1 million or more to just like set the inverter, the batteries and all of that. So if we talk about the economic hardship and everything, it's quite expensive to get inverter. And also you mentioned, I don't know if you were saying that it cannot happen in 4 years or it will happen in 4 years. But at the end of the day, I think we forget about small business owners. I always use the people that sell frozen foods, for example. A lot of businesses are collapsing because of no lights. These people cannot buy fuel because it's expensive. So I think that when we see the plight of the people, why don't we try to do reforms that can work faster and better? Because from everything you've said, it's going to take time. But this time we're looking at is quite a long time, Mr. Oni. And inverter is expensive as well. I don't have inverter because I can't afford it.
Okay. So the truth is that if we expect magic or expect that things that should take time should be done pretty quickly, we would then make mistakes. I think that even the privatization mistakes were made because we did it already. But yeah, it was a good thing. I wouldn't want it reversed. So it would take time. A number of guys who are medium and small scale, even micro scale enterprises, if you watch your video or your interviews, a number of them live in those areas and power has improved. A number of them are band A guys. And with time, you'd have more people gravitate. 1, 2. You may just not be aware. The number of programs now where you can get an inverter and pay like a rental fee, which is minimal.
In Nigeria,
I don't want to start mentioning businesses. Okay. Yes, I don't want to start mentioning businesses that way. I can speak to you about it offline. At least one of my clients does that. A number of companies are beginning to do that, where you can take solar panels, take the equipment, and pay a rental, right? So if we do not have sufficient information, and part of the problem, particularly this administration does have, and maybe even NERC, is that there isn't sufficient publicity around what is being done. You don't have people coming out to speak brilliantly about SAME and to provide data, statistics, comparison. So if you do find people do that and provide sufficient information, people will be better informed, will know that some of these assumptions have changed over time. So I think that if you have that being done, you have the right people coming to speak, not just politics. They come out with data, facts, and they get airtime. People will know. For example, you're not aware that you can get inverters and do a rental, which is even crazy. That amount is quite minimal. So it's about information, it's about enlightenment.
I also want to speak about, you said Band A, a lot of these people are in Band A. I don't know if you've heard the cries of the people that are on Band A when they talk about the high tariffs, they cannot afford it. And also sometimes the Band A, they do not get lights that they're supposed to get. I just want you to quickly touch on that for me.
Okay, I've always been of the view that electricity isn't cheap. And part of the problem we have is the balkanization of the grid and a lot of people going off-grid. If you do off-grid, it's going to be more expensive than if you did on-grid. And because we still pay for the inefficiencies of many of the discos, that's why it's expensive. I think with time, as you have more people contribute, as you have more investment and investors and creative means of doing things. For example, there's something they call an economic merit dispatch arrangement for the grid. The cheapest plants, which are hydro, come on stream first before you then have a number of these thermal plants that are gas. But because there are historical arrangements to ensure that certain plants that are a bit expensive are on the grid, ultimately it's expensive. So cost of gas, inefficiencies are those issues. But when you have the grid improve and you have more people able to get, it's economics of scale. So the more people you have, I've been one of those advocates that have said to NEC that I think it's so expensive. It's one of the most expensive, more expensive than parts of Canada where I had schooled in the past. So I agree, and I think people will continue to complain because it's quite expensive and something needs to be done in terms of encouraging more investment. It's economics of scale. The more people you have on the grid, the more investors you have on the grid, the cheaper it should get. But yes, I agree that it's expensive, but power isn't necessarily cheap, and power isn't free, because there's a cost to producing every unit of power, every kilowatt hour. There's a cost to it.
Okay.
So we also need to teach people to be energy efficient too. You need to retrofit, use cheaper and energy-saving facilities, right? That helps drop your energy cost. Like I said, my energy cost dropped by about half when I introduced solar too at home. So I think these are those things we need to take into consideration. And people need to have sufficient information as to cost, as to ability to even do rentals. And these things are not as expensive as they used to be historically.
I can assure you that a lot of Nigerians have learned